Since the earliest days of recording, audio engineers have needed to control the mix of sounds to enhance musical performances. At first it was the mix of acoustic instruments and voices in an orchestra or big band, and later the mix of sounds coming from multiple microphones and electronic instruments. Controlling all these sounds required a hardware mixing console. Mixers got bigger as they required more channels for each individual microphone or instrument in the performance. When computers took over the mixing of these sounds in DAWs, software designers designed their software to match the look of the hardware mixing console. So mixing in the computer looks very similar to mixing on a hardware console. Both hardware and software consoles have similar design elements. Each channel, called a channel strip, has a fader to control the volume of the sound, a panner to control where it is in the field, right and left, an input and an output section to determine where the signal comes from and where it goes to, auxiliary sends to send the sound to outboard gear like reverbs, and insert points to attach outboard gear to the signal path to control the tone. A mixer processes sounds going into a recording device, shapes them into better sounding elements of a sonic whole, and then recombines them into a finished audio mix that best represents the original performance or concept. Although they have the same functions, digital mixers work differently from analog ones. Here's some examples of the various kinds of digital channel strips. These dark blue ones are my drums. Individual channels for the kick, the rest of the drums, the clap, and the crash. This is the input section showing the routing from where the signal originated. Up top we have the inserts where I put in software analogous to the hardware inserts to change the tone or maybe compress the signal. Next we have the auxiliary sends. In this case, I'm sending the drums to a plate reverb, which is here. This plate reverb is returning to the mix on an aux return, auxiliary return. All the drums are grouped to the drum bus, so this would be a master bus fader. And then the buses go to the final output. This is the master fader for the whole mix, where I can finalize it with plugins and control the various volume levels and even do a fade out like this. Here's how we get audio into the hardware and software mixers. Connections to a hardware mixer are made with actual physical wires. It's called hardwiring. The microphones or instruments are plugged directly into the mixer or into a patch bay, which is a point that connects to the mixer itself with a physical wire. In software, the audio is received through the audio interface, and then the connections to the mixer are made in the software. This allows for a lot more possibilities and actually an unlimited number of routing paths. Every mixer has three basic sections that process audio. The input section, where the signal is amplified or adjusted. The processing section, where signals are shaped internally and sent to external processors. And then the output section, where the signals are grouped with other signals and blended together. When several signals are combined prior to a final mix, it's similar to when a group of people get on a bus. So a mixer may have several paths called buses, each of which sends several signals to one destination. Each audio signal from a microphone, guitar, synthesizer, or other signal source gets its own home, called a channel, of the mixing console, and each channel is laid out vertically in a channel strip. The channel strip contains the most important functions that are typically needed for that audio signal: to amplify it, change its tone, send it off to other gear and accept it back, and finally to set its overall level in the final mix. Here on this hardware mixer, we have the input section with this trim pot to control the level of the audio entering the channel, and also a switch to control whether it's a line level signal or a mic level signal. More on that later. Here's the processing section with the equalization and the auxiliary sends to send the signal to outboard processors. And finally, here's the output section, the channel fader to control its volume, the panning pot to control its position in the mix, and the master fader to control the volume of the final mix. We also have these master faders for the buses or groups, which controls the overall level of the entire group at once. And we have the aux returns to bring the reverb or delay processing back into the final mix. The middle of a typical channel strip contains the EQ and send sections. EQ is short for equalization, which is the process of changing the tone of the audio, like the treble and bass, in ways that can be very subtle or very dramatic. We'll talk a lot about EQ in some upcoming videos. The send section, known as the aux sends, which is short for auxiliary sends, lets you send the signal to an external processor like a reverb unit or an echo to add that or another effect to the sound. This reverb signal, however, doesn't come directly back to the channel strip, but comes back to another section of the mixer called the aux returns. Sometimes you do need a signal to be processed and returned to the same channel strip. This is handled by the channel inserts on the channel strip. The channel inserts are used to process audio on one single channel, whereas the channel sends can be used to send several channels to one unit, such as a reverb or delay. Here at Bass-Hit, I often use the channel insert function to send the signal to one of these outboard processors like an equalizer or a compressor. I can also use my auxiliary outputs to send it to an external reverb and bring that back into an auxiliary fader. Sometimes I use a group send to send to an outboard reverb or delay, and then I bring that reverb back into an auxiliary return. After all this processing, the mixer can send the full audio mix to several places. Of course, the fundamental place is a good set of speakers called the studio monitors, so you can hear your work and the results of your creativity. Here at Bass-Hit, I have my master output connected to a speaker selector switch, which then goes to a number of different monitors. The monitor section of the mixer will connect to a power amp or powered speakers. More about this in the next video.